All right. So, yesterday, we got some new documents that were released by a judge on Jeffrey Epstein and some of his associates, if you want to call it that. And honestly, from what I've seen so far, a lot of this is stuff that we partially at least already knew or largely already knew. You hear a lot of familiar names that are brought up in some of these documents, like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrews and a couple others that we've heard before. There were some names that I personally hadn't heard before. Maybe other people had, like Stephen Hawking. There were allegations somewhere here that people were talking about that he participated in an orgy or something like that. There were a couple other names that were sprinkled in there. Al Gore was in there, although his mention in the documents wasn't him being accused of any wrongdoing. It was just sort of somebody asked a question about him, and so that happened to be in this series of documents with the questions and the answers that the prosecution and the witnesses were answering. And so there were a lot of different names here, but I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest different quotes that we got about some of these top figures, and also just again an absolutely insane defense that I saw here from Alan Dershowitz on his connection to Epstein. But first, I just want to walk through real quick, just a refresher here for everybody, including myself. Who exactly is Jeffrey Epstein, right? And this is going to come into play when we're watching the later Alan Dershowitz clip, okay? They say a millionaire known for associating with celebrities, politicians, billionaires, and academic stars. Epstein became the subject of a police investigation in Palm Beach, Florida in 2005. Keep that in mind, 2005, after he was accused of paying a 14-year-old girl for sex. He was then arrested in 2006. Dozens of other girls come out, they described similar sexual abuse, but prosecutors gave him basically a sweetheart deal and ultimately allowed him to plead guilty in 2008 to a charge only involving a single victim, and then he served 13 months in a jail work release program. So extremely cozy deal for somebody who pled guilty, okay, to sexual abuse of a minor, right? Now, another interesting part of this is that Donald Trump then went on to bring into his cabinet, as under his administration, as his labor secretary, I believe, the guy who was responsible for giving him this sweetheart deal. Okay, kind of interesting there. Questionable judgment, to say the least, right? But they say some famous acquaintances abandoned Epstein after his conviction, including former presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, but many did not. Epstein continued to mingle with the rich and famous for another decade, often through philanthropic work. One of the people who obviously stands out on this aspect of it is Bill Gates. Now, a lot of people have suggested, and I don't even think this is really controversial at this point, that that's the reason why Melinda Gates, his wife, or now ex-wife, ended up leaving him, is because he was so cozy with somebody who was a known, child predator and a sex offender, right? And Bill Gates continued to work for him. I guess Bill Gates' defense is he was helping with philanthropic work or something like that. Personally, if I knew that somebody who was in, this powerful and well-known of a person who was, a sex criminal and was pleading guilty for abusing children, probably wouldn't associate with them in any way, shape, or form. Again, highly questionable that you would even make that decision. As if Bill Gates, one of the richest men on the face of the planet, needs help with something. What does Bill Gates need from Jeffrey Epstein? Anyways, there's a lot of questions surrounding Bill Gates in that aspect of it. But they say reporting by the Miami Herald renewed interest in the scandal, and federal prosecutors in New York then charged Epstein in 2019 with sex trafficking, and he killed himself in jail while awaiting trial. The U.S. attorney in Manhattan then prosecuted Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, for helping recruit his underage victims, and she was convicted in 2021, is now serving a 20-year prison sentence, right? And it was actually kind of funny because when these documents were coming out, she tried to come out and make sort of a feminist response to this, and she was like, well, isn't it curious how all of these men were involved in these alleged crimes, and I'm a woman and I'm the only person who's sitting in jail, right? So she kind of tried to use feminism to her defense, even though she was just convicted of a 20-year prison term for sex trafficking, and trafficking underage girls to be abused, right? Trying to use the feminist response in that kind of a situation, not the best argument, including the fact that, Epstein and other people who were associated with them ended up dying in jail. Also just a bizarre argument. But anyways, what are these records about? The documents being unsealed are part of a 2015 lawsuit filed by Maxwell by one of Epstein's victims, Virginia Giuffre. She is one of dozens of women who sued Epstein, saying that he had abused them at his homes in Florida, New York, and the Virgin Islands and New Mexico. This girl said that in the summer that she turned 17, she was lured away from a job as a spa attendant at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club to become a masseuse for Epstein, a job that involved performing sexual acts. She then also claimed that she was pressured into having sex with men in Epstein's social orbit, including, again, Prince Andrew, former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson, former U.S. Senator George Mitchell, and the billionaire Glenn Dubin, among others. All of those men said that her accounts were fabricated. She then settled a lawsuit against Prince Andrew in 2022, and I hope you guys remember that famous Prince Andrew interview where he was being questioned on Virginia Giuffre, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Guffrey, whatever. And he was doing this interview, and one of the things that she had detailed about her experience with Prince Andrew was that he was sweating a lot. And he made a defense. He legitimately tried to make the defense in this interview when he was being pressed on it and was extremely nervous. And I'm pretty sure he was sweating in the interview. And he said, it was impossible for me to sweat at the time because I had some sort of a disease, right? Or some sort of like traumatic experience in his past. He said, I cannot sweat. I can't physically sweat, so therefore I'm innocent. Okay, just so ridiculous, right? That same year, she then withdrew an accusation that she made against Epstein's former attorney, Alan Dershowitz, saying she may have made a mistake in identifying him as an abuser. So his name ends up coming up in these documents, right? And I'm going to show you that here in a second. But first, let's get to, Bill Clinton, right? From the Epstein files that were just unsealed. Question that was asked to a witness, quote, did Jeffrey ever talk to you about Bill Clinton? The answer, he said one time that Clinton likes them young, referring to girls. I mean, pretty fucking disgusting, right? So this is about Bill Clinton. And I think that this is new. I don't think I've seen this before. He likes them young. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, man. This is a former president, right? This was on Prince Andrew and Jean-Luc Brunel, who I'm pretty sure that's the guy who ended up killing himself suspiciously in prison as well. Jane Doe number 3 was forced to have sexual relations with this prince when she was a minor on three separate occasions or three separate geographical locations. Epstein forced Jane Doe 3 to have sexual relations with was a member of the British royal family, Prince Andrew. Okay, and Epstein sexually trafficked Jane Doe 3 to Jean-Luc Brunel many times. So here you have again Prince Andrew being implicated as part of this as well, right? And now we get to Alan Dershowitz, right? So this is what they said. Jane Doe number 3 is a minor who was forced to have sexual relationships with people on behalf of Epstein. Epstein forced then minor Jane Doe 3 to have sexual relations with former Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, a close friend of Epstein and well-known criminal defense attorney. Who was he a criminal defense attorney for? We'll get to that. So, I mean, you can read the details here, right? I mean, required her to have sexual relations with Dershowitz on multiple occasions while she was a minor. Not only in Florida, but also on private planes in New York, New Mexico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. In addition to being a participant in the abuse of Jane Doe number 3 and other minors, Alan Dershowitz was an eyewitness to the sexual abuse of many other minors by Epstein and several of his co-conspirators. Okay, so I mean, it's not looking too good for the Dersh man here. Now, this is kind of confusing to walk through because they do say that Virginia Giuffre later, ended up saying that Alan Dershowitz, maybe it was a case of mistaken identity and, she withdrew her accusation against him. I don't know if Virginia Giuffre is Jane Doe number 3 or if this is a different person because her name's not listed here. It makes me think that it's a different person because we all know Virginia Giuffre and her name. So why would they use Jane Doe 3 if it was her? Because the purpose of using Jane Doe in this kind of a context is to protect their identity, right? And there were numerous people whose names were left out of this, for their own personal safety and protection and whatever the case may be. So, take with that what you will. These may be accusations, serious accusations against Alan Dershowitz. So now we get to him. So this was his defense. He went on multiple different outlets. This one, I believe, took place before the documents came out. And so he's saying, I want everything out. I want all of the information out because I vehemently deny I did anything wrong, put it all out there. But just listen to what he says in this interview here.
Thank you. You pushed for a long time for all the names to come out. This would be the question. How much are we to believe is guilt by association versus judging people by the company they kept, and that being someone after the late 2000s who had pleaded guilty to child prostitution?
Well, you can judge them for having shown bad judgment, but you can't conclude that any accusations against them are true without hearing the evidence. The reason I wanted everything put out, and I don't think the judge put everything out. I think she was selective in what she put out, and that's unfair. I want everything out, every document, every piece of paper, half-truths or lies. And I wanted them out for personal reasons because I know that they would prove what I've said from day one, that I did nothing wrong. The woman who accused me later admitted that she may have misidentified me, confused me with someone else. So I wanted everything out right from the beginning because I have nothing to hide. There are some people who may be ashamed of the fact that they hung out with Epstein. But remember, a lot of people hung out with Epstein before he was convicted. Presidents of Harvard, deans, Nobel quality scientists. He was very well thought of in the beginning. None of us knew about his private life that he kept so secret. There's a difference between what happened after he was convicted and the nature of the relationship after he was convicted, and everybody should judge for themselves. But I think the public has the right to hear and see everything, not selectively picked by a judge or anyone else.
Okay, so I do agree that we should get to know everything about Jeffrey Epstein, all of his associates, all of the names, all of the clients that he had. I think we definitely do deserve to have all of that information made public. I mean, we're talking about some of the most powerful, influential billionaires, politicians in the world, okay, who were involved with this guy. They should be outed fully, right? And then held accountable if it's possible to hold them accountable for potentially being involved with a, rampant, world, renowned sex criminal and child sex trafficker. We should know about that, okay? Especially if it's very powerful people in the world, right? So I agree with him on that. However, okay, it's kind of bizarre for Alan Dershowitz to make the case that there's a difference between hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein before his conviction, right? When, okay, maybe you can make a plausible deniability case. I didn't know that he was doing this in his private life. I just knew him through somebody or whatever the case may be. And then that's different than hanging out with him, associating with him after he was convicted of paying, a 14-year-old for sex. I agree that there is a difference between those two things, and you do get that added layer of plausible deniability. However, you, Alan Dershowitz, were the guy who defended him. You defended him in court in that case. I mean, Alan Dershowitz helped sex offender Jeffrey Epstein get a plea deal. He was working with Jeffrey Epstein to get him that sweetheart deal back in 2008, where he was given 13 months of effectively like house arrest. Okay? He helped him to get that deal. So for you specifically to make the argument, well, you can't really judge anybody for associating with him. We didn't know what was going on. You didn't know what was going on. You defended him in the case that he then pled guilty to. If anybody knew what was going on, more than anything, it would be you. I mean, just a bizarre argument for somebody like the Dersh to make. And keep in mind, I mean, this guy has a track record of defending some of the worst people you've ever known in your entire life, okay? And also some of the most guilty people you've ever known in your entire life. O.J. Simpson, Harvey Weinstein, okay? Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, now they're floating the idea of having Alan Dershowitz, I'm not even kidding, defend Israel in the case that South Africa brought to the International Court of Justice for genocide. They're seriously floating his name to be their defense in that case. I mean, I guess, go for it. I guess I'd be happy with that, right? It would be pretty funny if they decided to do that right now after all of this just came out. But also I think he's the guy for the job, right? So I mean, just every single thing about this guy's career. He defended Trump as well in his impeachment. Has he ever defended somebody who deserves a defense, right? I mean, maybe he might, I won't say that because maybe he has. But just some of those top names says a lot about who this guy is, right? And so now we get to this clip, which is arguably the best, so credit to you if you stuck around throughout this entire video. This part is fucking hilarious. So now we have Alan Dershowitz making another media appearance. That first one was before the documents came out. This is after the documents come out. And this is his response here.
Now, the one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did. So let's put this in context.
Okay. I mean, on the one hand, it's pretty disgusting. You know, if you are somebody, as I am, who is empathetic and, you know, feels for the Israelis who were killed on October 7th, some of them in horrific ways. On the one hand, it's kind of bizarre to use them as sort of a deflection away from accusations against you for associating with Jeffrey Epstein, which has nothing to do with October 7th or Hamas or anything like that. So bizarre and kind of gross to use them and their deaths and you know, all of that as a defense for yourself. But also, I mean, what the fuck? He wants a list of feminists, whatever that means. He wants a list of all of the feminists in the world, in the United States. Give him a list. And he's going to go through, and I guess he's going to check their social media profiles to see if they condemned Hamas or whether or not they praised Hamas. I mean, this is legitimate. He just said this on live TV. I don't think I've ever seen such a radical left turn of a defense here from somebody to try to deflect away from the main point, right? No, this isn't about me defending Jeffrey Epstein in court. This isn't about me and my suspicious connections and the allegations against me in relation to Epstein. This is about Hamas. Everything is about Hamas. You are Hamas, I'm Hamas, everybody's Hamas. I mean, just absolutely bizarre there from Alan Dershowitz. So, you know, at the end of the day, again, a lot of this wasn't stuff that we didn't really know before. We knew about Trump. We knew about Ehud Barak. We knew about, you know, Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton and all their associations. A lot of it we still don't know, right? We don't know the details, all the specific details about, okay, you know, what exactly did Bill Clinton do with Jeffrey Epstein, right? You know, what exactly did a lot of these guys who have connections with him do with Jeffrey Epstein? So there's a lot of unanswered questions, for sure. This wasn't like, you know, the end-all, be-all for clearing up who Epstein was and what his connections meant with each individual person. So I hope that there's a lot more that comes in the next couple of days. Apparently that's what's going to happen. I'll keep you guys updated if we get any other big updates. But as of right now, it seems like that's basically it.